Me. This time of year, it's kind of fun because you can tell who's in the hot climate and who's in a cooler climate, or who's still in the morning and in the evening. Well, welcome everybody, and just letting you know that some of us have been at the weekend on the first foundation of mindfulness, on Kaya Vipassana, on the body, basically mindfulness of our bodies. And so when you listen to the talk, you'll hear that part of that theme running through the talk. Some of my talk is based on some of the questions that happened this morning, so that also will be woven into the talk. So the talk is also really a basic love and wisdom talk. Kind of often we can see those are as opposites, love and wisdom, but my attempt is to explain a bit about how we can superficially see those as paradoxical, but also when we understand their meaning and start practicing them, we can see how they come together for us in our practice. So that the basis for a lot of my own love and wisdom talks is a quotation from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, which is that love tells me I'm everything, and wisdom tells me I'm nothing. And between the two, my life flows. And you can see that's why, we often, if we understand that meaning, love tells me I'm everything, which we tend to like better than wisdom tells me I'm nothing. Again, superficially, we tend to gravitate toward everything and oneness rather than nothingness. That they can seem like two different streams, but as you practice them, you start to see there's a kind of flexibility, and you understand they're deep truths that don't have to seem so contradictory. So often I think that we tend to think that we have to get rid of our body or rid of thoughts or rid of emotions to be free. But that what we're doing is we're understanding them. So we're understanding what our body is through the practice of mindfulness, Kaya Vipassana. And when we understand thinking or thought rather than having to get rid of it, or we understand emotion rather than having to get rid of it. So basically, we don't annihilate or get rid of anything to be free. And this is so important that we come to see that peace, real peace and real freedom is coming from an unconditional acceptance of things as they are. This does not mean that we don't try to change things. This is this deep moment by moment peace that's possible and freedom in this world. There was a great teacher in Burma, a monk, teacher, scholar. He was known to be fully enlightened, Mahasi Sayadaw. He said that total freedom, full enlightenment, is no more desire for existence and no more desire for non-existence. And I love that, and it actually makes me giggle because it's so pure. It's so free. It's like basically there's nowhere to go, right? No more desire for existence, no more desire for non-existence. It's a total letting go without conditions with whatever's happening. So when we tend to think, well, freedom's fine if we just get rid of shame, right? Or get rid of hopelessness, or we get rid of doubt, or we can hold on to happiness, or we can hold on to joy, we can hold on to compassion, we can get rid of grief, we can get rid of rage. We have conditions, right? Those are the conditions we place on experience. When we are meditating, we want to get rid of sleepiness. When we're about to go to sleep, we want sleepiness, right? It's like this incredible, our minds are so fickle when it comes to experience itself. And so peace is really not in getting rid of shame, it's in understanding it so that it doesn't have power over us. There's this balance of imperturbability and kindness. So that experience can come and go just as it is. We understand it's not ours. We understand we don't have to manipulate it. We can just mostly feel the corresponding physical sensations in our body, not take the thoughts personally, right? This whole landscape of shame comes and goes by itself. No problem. So learning, it's like this learning that we undertake again and again and again, that we're not trying to get rid of anything, we're trying to get a relationship with what's happening. But it's a specific kind of relationship of wisdom. It's a wisdom relationship. It's a loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity relationship, which are all really without conditions. We love ourselves no matter what. Right? That metta is without conditions. It's a kindness that doesn't have a condition on it. Not always easy. And when we touch into something, for example, like peace, we can get glimpses of when the mindfulness, someone this morning was talking about this, like this glimpse of the awareness felt free. So powerful. And there's often a very, very, sometimes sublime, but soft, very soft reassurance that things are okay as they are. That comes from these impersonal factors that come together, such as mindfulness and energy, kindness, right? That these factors come together in a moment. There's a glimpse of freedom. And we feel that freedom is possible for all of us, which includes all the pain in the world, includes all the pain in the world, all the joy in the world, all the boredom in the world. And the hard part is that included in that is that we often do need reassurance, right? That these experiences are impermanent. And there comes about these times when then we need reassurance again. So there's this dance of reassurance, need for reassurance, reassurance, need for reassurance. And we start to get more motivated to practice, to have more access to freedom, to peace, to know it's more and more possible for us in any given moment and for others in this world. I have a deepening practice, which may sound very simple, but I usually just try to find one flower It doesn't have to be a necessarily gorgeous flower. It can. We have these Keavi trees here. They're mesquite. They were brought over from Mexico to Hawaii. And sometimes if I can't find any other flower, their flowers aren't necessarily considered to be like a rose-like look. But every day I try to find something to make an offering with. And of course, sometimes I grow, it's called jasmine in most part of the world in the West, but it's in Hawaii, it's called pikaki. It's a very small, white, very small flower, but the scent is divine. So sometimes I have those flowers. I have 2 rose bushes, because the insects are so intense here and I don't really want to get involved in killing. So I have these 2 little bushes. I just cut off all this dead stuff this morning from the insects. But sometimes I have a beautiful flower, and sometimes not so traditionally, a little teeny poof of something that hardly looks like a flower. But every day now, I just make a little offering with it. And what is it an offering to? And it's really this growing offering to impermanence itself, to the fleetingness of life, to being connected with that truth, but also being connected with beauty, the beauty and the fleetingness, the fleetingness, fleetingness, um, fleeting aspect of life, of each moment. And if we contemplate flowers, I think we can see that in this human world, they are such a embodiment for us of beauty and impermanence, love and wisdom. And vulnerability. It's when you really try to just notice a thought, one thought, or if you try to notice one body sensation in your body, or certainly the lungs are so delicate, to notice one breath, like the sense of how holy life is, how holy one breath is, but how delicate. They're just like more delicate than the petals on a flower. And that's how our awareness has to be, to tune into it, to connect with it. It's not only delicate, but so fleeting. If you pay attention to just one breath, how hard it is to be with that, and as it disappears. And that it's holy, right? It's like we all know with birth and with death how important being with the breath is, with someone or ourselves. But actually, each moment is alive and passing away, alive and passing away. The Buddha taught this, that human life, human birth is so precious, that it's so rare, and it's the most important realm of existence to practice in. And how much do we squander that, right? How much do we just kind of diss it off? And you see, if you're connected to other beings, like a dragonfly or a frog or a feral cat or any being, a bird, it's like, do they have this chance like we do to practice in this way, to understand what we're doing here with this body, this incarnation that's so precious and so fleeting? And I think that we tend to, we're so trained, we're so conditioned to feel like something's wrong if we feel vulnerable. But the truth is that the next moment is unknown. That's the truth. The truth is that life is unpredictable, and that mindfulness is really being ready for anything to happen. So mindfulness is this incredible, it takes this incredible delicacy of attention, but it requires enormous strength to face that every moment anything can happen, anything can happen. And if we're connected with that, we're protected. And if we're not connected with it, we're always surprised, right? Whoa, this happened, you know. Oh, a couple of months ago, I have this injury that I went to this doctor and she said, Michelle, you're really injured. Like, what happened? And I'm like, I don't have a clue. Like, I still don't know, right? It's like, it's amazing how anything can happen, right? And it's just like anything can happen, but you still have to deal with it. Whether it's on the other side of the planet or on our front steps or in our bodies. And how much do we really notice? I feel like today is the new moon. And it has such significance. If you look at the old ancient world we used to live in as humans, it was so significant. There was no moon, there was no light. You had to navigate by starlight or dark, or you'd go to bed by whatever time it got dark. And you look at full moon, new moon, and the tides and how affected we are by the moon, and how little we tend to notice it. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, this teacher from India, said, the stars affect us and we affect them deeply. Deeply. But are we really here on this planet with our incredible friends of stars and moonlight, new moonlight, new moon, no light, wind, earth? And so when we talk about Kayanupassana, when we talk about, well, what is a human body, or what is a frog's body, or what is a dog's body, or what is our body, what is the earth, or even what is a planet, right? It's just like, what is going on here? And are we interested really? Or do we just want to control it or demand something from it? We had a friend in Honolulu that was from New York City, and he used to say that he used to think of his body as something he just put his head on. His head was so important, right? His thinking and his thoughts, that his body was just something to place his head on. That's its only use, right? That's how disconnected we can be with what's going on. Hmm. So when we take a step, do we pay attention to what's holding us? Are we grateful for like the earth? When we lie down in bed, and I'm talking about earth element, when we lay down in bed, are we grateful for what's holding us? Or when we sit in a chair, like we're sitting on something right now, and boy, we don't want it to get hard. But it's like, that's earth element. That's holding us. And do we even get it? Like, do we receive it? One of my favorite things that Mahasi Sayadaw said when he came to Massachusetts and taught a 3-week retreat, and I was cooking for him and cooking for the retreat. But I remember I listened to him very carefully, and he said that one thing that he would recommend for yogis, um, just before you get up, you ask yourself, why am I getting up? And I really took that to heart in my life and practice. It's like, why am I getting up? Because why? Because it's painful. It hurts. I can't handle it anymore. But if you pay attention and you're lying down for a while, it'll happen too. Like, why am I getting up? Because it's painful. Why am I moving when I'm standing for a while? Because it's painful. Why am I stopping walking? Because it's painful. Why are my eyes blinking? Why am I swallowing? Yeah, right. These are what is going on here again? It's like these questions. I'm not saying that you focus on it all the time, but they're really important questions because often with large movements like getting up from sitting, it's usually because we're not really stretching into earth element. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't get up at all. I'm saying, oh, hardness. We want it to be hard when we first sit down because we want it to hold us. And that's all I'm saying. Check it out. So the question is, are we curious? Are we interested? So when we take a breath, I'm going to go into this a little more in a minute, but it's like when we take a breath, we can either be aware that if we don't take a breath, we're not going to live very long. So from the perspective of love tells me I'm everything, understanding that we're totally dependent on the air, that we need it to breathe, hopefully will be part of our meditation practice. That what does that lead to? Gratitude. But it also can lead to investigation in the Vipassana sense. It's like, what is breath? What is air? It's so precious. I'm so dependent on it. And how come it's so hard to be interested in it? I'm only suggesting questions right now. Because I think it's because we're so dependent on it that it's hard to be interested in it. We don't want to feel that vulnerable. But also, when you do investigate it and you get closer and closer to it, it's just disappearing particles. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. But we certainly start to see that you can't possibly think that the breath is mine. It's not ours. We're borrowing air to breathe, right? It's like when you start looking in the Kayanupassana perspective, it's like everything that appears disappears. And it's just disappearing particles, whether it's a air element, fire element, earth element, water. It's like it's just so fleeting. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. And most of us want to scurry back to gratitude, right? It feels much more bearable and wonderful. It feels good to feel grateful for air. It's harder to get that it isn't ours. But if we start to investigate that it isn't ours, the point of this is that if we understand that body sensations aren't ours, that earth, hard, soft, air, I'll go into it a little more, vibration, pressure, tingling, tightness, all these different kinds of body sensations, when we start to get that they're not ours, when it comes to thought and we get that it isn't ours, and when it comes to emotions, like helplessness or happiness or doubt, or however, compassion, when we start to get that they're not ours, it's meant to be a great relief, freedom, peace. We all say we want peace in the world so much, but we have to understand what it is. So when we say, wisdom tells me I'm nothing, or we are not my body, I am not my body, we have to remember the paradox, which is when we take birth, we're totally responsible for our bodies. We're totally responsible to care for our bodies. So somebody might think, oh, if it isn't mine, then I don't have to take care of it. No, we don't get away with that. It's not the truth, because the truth is love and wisdom. The truth is both. And it's so paradoxical to us initially that we think, this is too hard for my poor little mind. I can't handle it, right? But it's actually the truth. Uh, so I'm going to shift this a little bit to, like, when I started to talk about the elements. I'm trying to, okay. Kaya Nupassana a little bit more deeply. And this is really going into the Vedana, Nupassana, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. But what I find so interesting about exploring elements and what our bodies are, there's usually a pleasant and an unpleasant side of the element. So say we're talking about earth element, and I was just talking about hard, but I could equally, do we love our pillow when we go to bed? I hope so. It's like we have to have something pleasant in the world. And the Buddha called sleep the world's greatest pleasure. And humans tend to add a little more pleasure in it by having a pillow, right? And so we have to, if you want to explore earth element, explore the pleasant and the unpleasant. There's the hard, but there's the soft, right? So I encourage you, when you get in bed, just really notice how pleasurable your pillow is. That's soft. That's the pleasant side of the earth element. Our clothes nowadays, our clothes, they like wash them so much, by the time we buy them, they've already been washed so many times they're soft. It's like, why? Because it's so pleasant. Look at our fleece jackets. Why do we like them? They're warm. They're warm and they're soft. So we look at the different elements, and there's that range of rough and smooth with earth element. We have the soft and hard. And with fire element, we have hot. Well, right now it's really hot here where I am. And how much hotter can my system really open to and stretch into, right? Hot, cold. How cold can it be before we don't really want to stretch into it? Warm, cool. And so there's again this investigation. Who am I? Who are you? Fire element. But this isn't meant to be just an intellectual thought process. It's meant to be that you drop into our body. And when you're drinking a glass of water, all of the elements are there. Even if you start with a cold glass of water and you touch the hardness of the glass, earth element, you start to notice the intention to sip. You notice the water touching you. And we've already heard, well, water you can't experience in and of itself. So you'll notice maybe tingling as the water goes down. That's the air element. You might notice smoothness. That might be earth element, right? Etc. Maybe it goes from cold to warm, fire element. And so we might say, I drank a glass of water, but actually it was just the elements. There was an intention, a mental intention to sip. There was the halfway down the throat, there's an intention to swallow. This is just mind and body flowing along. And we don't have to be identified with it as mine or me or I if we're paying attention carefully. We just see earth, air, fire, and water coming and going by itself. And there's so many nuances, like with the air element, I think you probably can hear from me that air element is my most accessible. So I can talk about light vibration, tingling, particles, movement, pressure, tightness, throbbing, pulling, stabbing, noticing all the pleasant and unpleasant aspects of air. And the idea is that we start to get that what we might think of as, you know, my movement is air element and often earth element, just coming and going by itself. Water, as we talked about this, yesterday morning more, but that sense of how it holds and it contains the other elements. It makes it possible for all the elements to come together in our bodies. So the idea of this practice is that we start to explore our preferences versus attachments. And we start to see that when I first started to practice, I've said this, but continue to say it, I'd say 98 to 99% of my experience I was not at peace with, wasn't acceptable to me. And that idea that I started to see that I could stretch more and stretch more and stretch more and start to come to peace with, say, for example, throbbing or stabbing versus light, tingling, and vibration, air element. And these are words. And so the word hard or the word soft or the word tingling, they're meant to be words, vibration, that help us, just like the word fear or happiness. They're words to help us get closer to the experience, to get interested, to know those are just words themselves, to be able to really receive the direct experience of life itself and to understand. Some of you have heard I've mentioned that when I first moved to this house that I live in, there was a mother feral cat that came, and then she had two daughters. They've lived here now over 10 years. And one of the things that I've really appreciated about them is their relationship to water. Uh, and that's three cats, three different water bowls in three different areas of the outside. Um, and often there's many insects because I live in the desert, so that everybody wants water in the desert, many beings. But you notice that these feral cats, when I put down a bowl of fresh water, when I've taken the time, I try to every other day. Hopefully it's better every day, but to clean the dish, to place the water, I watch them very carefully. And it's the thing they're the most grateful for. They love water. They love water so much that it's the only time that they consistently will look at me. It's very quick. You have to take your time. I have to really take the time. It's very quick, but they'll look up at me very quickly, and I can see them thanking me. They're so grateful. And the way they drink the water, their whole body just quivers with the happiness of having it. And I can tell you that I can put plenty of things down and they quiver and they're happy. But I'm trying to say that I'm so moved by the simplicity of it. And I try to learn from it because my conditioning is actually, I won't tell you how intense it was, but not to like water. My father used to say, don't drink water, it gets in your mouth. It was just like, don't drink water. Ugh, it was awful. So, for me, it's just like water. And I have a practice, like I have to drink a glass of water in the morning, like first thing, because it just kind of helps me get over that conditioning. And I don't relate to water like those cats. Like, it's like I look at it, it's like, okay, let's get our courage up to knock this glass of water down. And then I can kind of get into it like it's a practice. But what helps me is seeing these feral cats. It's incredible, really, just their relationship to water. You know what? They know far better than I do how important it is for their life. And there it is again, right? Love tells me I'm everything. The gratitude, the knowing that we borrow water to have a body. All of us beings do. And look at the planet and look at what has happened to water. Are we, what is what is off in the human mind, right? That, we've gotten this out of touch. I have read this poem just once before, but so here's a poet, Wang Anshi, who lived 1021 to 1086 in China and got to practice the last 10 years of his life. This is one of his very last poems. Thoughts as I lie alone. Alone, a noon dove calling in spring shade. I lie in a valley of forest quiet. Scraps of cloud pass, scattering rain. And I listen, late in life, to its clatter. Eyes full of red and green confusion. Are sad times unraveling my legacy. There's no word near these thoughts, still as Bell Mountain in its slumber. Listening to rain, listening to its clatter late in life. It's like he finally got to listen to it. That's something so fortunate when we get to practice. So I've mentioned this injury. I'm not going to go into it, but desperation can bring about different attempts at treatment. And I went to Honolulu for a day just to get this. It turned out to be 4 injections rather than 1, but it's called plasma-rich platelets. Yeah, plasma-rich platelets. And they take your own blood and shake it and put it in a solution. And I understood what was going to happen, I thought, know the person who did it, and heard that it would be painful. I was ready, was ready for it. But I didn't know that she was going to add this other substance into it. And there was a nurse in the room with me, with her, and again, I know this person kind of pretty well. And so we were kind of started the first. She did tell me I was going to have four injections. So we started the first one. And the other, the PRP, the plasma-rich platelets went in. And it hurt, but it wasn't that bad. And those moments where you're like, phew, I did it, great, it's okay. And then she started to put this other stuff in, and I'm like, oh, and it's like, it was so painful. And I was like, oh, and then she's like, well, what are you feeling? And I'm like, it's tight. And she's like, well, it's going to get more intense. And I'm like, and the nurse and her are like, what are you feeling? I'm like, it's tight. And I'm like, it's getting tighter. And I'm like, it's tight, tight, tight. And I said, this is just like meditation practice with Theta Upandita. It's like, I would hit these places of like, it was so tight. I'd just be like, tight, 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 tight. And she said, oh, what do you think that is? And I said, oh, I teach meditation. It's air element. I'm like, it's air element. It's like really, really painful and it's really tight. And she said, oh, well, I'm putting oxygen in. Of course, right? It was air element. It was like tight. And they were both very impressed that I was like, I got that it was air element. I didn't know it was oxygen, but it was really so funny. But then I had to go through three more of them. And it was so intense. She had to massage. I'm like, hey, lady, like, you're gonna massage this for a while before we go on, because this is like almost impossible for me to like do. So we did it really slowly, and it was okay. But you know, some of this practice is very helpful in situations like this. I just want to say, like, when I understood that I was actually having oxygen on top of this other stuff and that it was just air element, it was much easier to deal with, right? We have to just remember that, like, life is full of what? This vast range of joy and sorrow. And I really want to say, when you look at the emotions that can come out that are very difficult for us, and you start noticing what's happening in the body, it's often, again, it's fire element, it's air element, it's earth element. There'll be tightness, there'll be hardness, there'll be heaviness. It's just the elements in their intense, extreme form. So the word pain, just like the word hard or the word tight or the word doubt or, any of these words, the encouragement is to take the word and help us not reject the word, but help us get closer to what is the direct experience in our body, kaya nupassana. And it's really just karma, just rolling along. We're living out the karma, and however it is, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And we can keep finding peace with it, keep finding peace with it, keep finding peace with it. Or distract ourselves healthily, right? A lot of our teaching this weekend has hopefully sunk in some more about when we can't be with something, it's okay. We take a break. I think one of the gifts of self-retreat, and for those of you who are here for the Sunday sitting and will come next Sunday, or people at Sunday at the end of the weekend, a lot of you are coming next weekend. It's like either people staying for the whole month, or it's like there's a range, but it's like the encouragement that when we do take the time to slow down, that we can explore this love tells me I'm everything, wisdom tells me I'm nothing, sometimes within 5 minutes. sometimes we can take a whole week to explore earth element or air element, or sometimes it's a few minutes. But I have to say, like, that for me, like, the sense of this self-retreat at home or teaching at home, and just when I walk down the steps from where I teach and taking the time to touch the walls, earth element, taking the time to touch each step, earth element. It's like, and gratitude, right? It's like it's like there's a tendency in us to think, I did that once. Okay, right? What's next? What's next? What's next? I want another teaching. I want another teaching, another teaching. It's like, but actually, earth, air, fire, and water are really our bodies, and the body of the earth and the body of the stars. It's like we all hear that we're made up of stardust, right? And we look at the sky and we think they're way far away, but the light and the dark are touching our eyes. They're not out there. They're touching the eye. And why aren't we noticing it? Because we're not taking the time. We're not valuing it enough to take the time to be that connected, because it's the truth. It's not a fabrication. We talk about just enough concentration to be here. Too much concentration is controlling how things are. We don't need it. We need enough to be quiet enough, still enough to explore. That's the purpose of concentration. To explore, to explore, to explore, to explore, to explore. To get free, to get freer, to get freer, to get freer. I can touch the wall as I walk down the steps. And of course, because I'm injured, I'm really touching the wall now. I'm using it to hold myself up. It's like touch the wall, gratitude, but feeling the sensations, right? Within a few seconds, again, it's love and wisdom, love and wisdom. It doesn't have to be so separate. It's just taking the time to be interested in the truth. Whether you're drinking some water, eating some food, brushing your hair, brushing your teeth. Hmm. I guess there's maybe two more things I'll talk about. And one, I think I mentioned this maybe a Sunday or two ago, but just because I'm injured, I'm really having to go slower. My walks through the neighborhood are so small that last night somebody went by when I was outside walking. I tend to walk at night because it's cooler. And she said, I haven't seen you for months. And I'm like, well, I actually haven't been across the street for months, and that, like, it was so funny. Like, wow, my world kind of shrunk into this little area that I walk in. And there'll be times where I have to go through boredom. I head out there and it's like, oh, okay, we are going to be on a little stretch of road that we've been doing every day, twice a day for over and over and over and over and over and over. And it's a desert. So there's, and it's like, and I have to stop a lot. And I used to, every time there's a resistance to stopping, resting. And I've mentioned this before, but it's getting even to be a more amazing practice of stopping, resting, bowing. And I don't care anymore what the neighbors think. It's just like, it's awesome. It's like, stop, rest, bow. Stop, rest, bow. And this has become such an amazing practice now when I go in the kitchen. It's like, oh, I don't have to rest, but I want to. Like, stop, rest, bow. Okay, back in the bathroom to brush my teeth. Wow. Stop, rest, bow. Stop, rest, bow. It actually doesn't take much time. It doesn't matter what we bow to. But I have found that on my little strolls, I call them, there's a deepening bowing, a deepening of the understanding in the bowing, whether it likes to a cloud or the ocean or a neighbor. And now I'm more vulnerable to neighbors talking to me because I'm not moving very fast. And some neighbors you don't necessarily want to be, vulnerable to because they really will talk a lot. And there's this one neighbor, she's like maybe 84 and she's lonely. And I'll just see her coming and I'll be like, oh no, I'm gonna be stuck with her. But then when I'll just like stop, rest. And I don't bow to her directly where she sees it, but it's like I learned so much from her. It's just amazing how much I'm learning from her. Just like, okay, a different way of being. It's like that sense. I have to say, I have I I have thought that I've been going pretty slowly in my life and very mindful, but this is a whole other level of seeing how much in a hurry I've been. It's awesome. I'm not saying that I would choose this injury because it's painful necessarily, but boy, the learning is awesome. There's a story from a teacher I heard my second retreat, my second Vipassana retreat. And this teacher had been a monk in Asia for a long time. And when he came back to the West and then was visiting New York City, a friend of his asked him to come to a hospital to maybe sit with and maybe offer some comfort to a woman in the hospital who'd been in an iron lung most of her life in that hospital. She was quite old at that point, and he's like, sure. And he went in, and the longer you practice, the more you walk into something like that, and you can almost grasp how difficult that would be for somebody. Like you can almost think you can't get it, but you can, because you've spent so much time with renunciation and going through all the suffering of not doing everything you want whenever you want to and getting whatever you want whenever you want to. It's like when you start to get that level of renunciation that this being has had to withstand, he knew right away that he could not offer any comfort at all. He knew she was going to help him. It was so profound. And he sat down and he was just like, ugh, how could you do this? How could you stand it? He was just started crying. And she said, every once in a while, a nurse comes into my room. And then every once in a while, when a nurse comes into my room, they'll open the window. And every once in a while, when the window gets opened, a breeze comes into my room, and that breeze touches my cheek. And that breeze tells me everything I need to know. air element. Let's sit for a minute. So see you next Sunday, people. See you next weekend, people. Oh yeah, no, see you at 3:30. 3:30 all the weekend and week and month-long people. 3:30 and we get to chant metta together and have a metta set. So that means keep going, keep going.